that we have in this case. What is this case about? Who are the main characters or the main entities at play? Oracle, okay? Who is trying to acquire Sun Microsystems, of course. Okay, so talk a little about background, okay? What kind of company is Oracle? It's a tech company. We're all tech companies here, but what does Oracle do? Software. Can you give me some examples of software that maybe even in your experience, has any of you used Oracle software in life? Accounting. What, sorry? Hyperion, you use that in your life, in your work? You do? Okay, fantastic. Okay. So they have a bunch of softwares. The company started off as being specialist in relational database system, right? So if you think about the Microsoft Access that you may have used, that's one type of relational database system where you collect information that gets connected to other information in your organization so that you can link them through time. When you do registration, you have to go through, well, I guess you don't, but your juniors, undergrads have to go through a system called Regular to register. We actually hired Oracle to do a system for us. So they have a PeopleSoft system that manage all the enrollment. But for some reason, their execution was somehow it didn't work. So we rolled back to the archaic Regular system again. But that's just some of the examples of what you want to do, right? PeopleSoft system allows you to look at people's enrollment, people's history, people's HR record, and even payroll, so you can pay them, track their evaluations and so on. But we don't have that, sadly. Okay, we were supposed to have that, but they rolled it back. What about Sun Microsystem? What does Sun do? Okay, hardware. So can we be more specific? When we talk about hardware, are we talking about like PCs, workstations? Okay. While Oracle, on the other hand, is more of a software company. Does Sun do just hardware? Does Sun do anything else except hardware? Okay, so they do some software too, like Java and Linux. Okay. SQL. Okay, so why is Oracle acquiring Sun? What's happening to Sun actually? Yeah, would you call Sun a successful company? In the past, did you know at one point in time Sun Microsystems used to be valued at $200 billion? Back at one point in time, when they were really, really successful. After all, you're kind of a monopoly in the market, right? So who's Sun's customers? Sorry? The operations? Corporations, business customers. Okay. And business customers demand, I guess, the best they could afford back at one point in time. But what has happened to business demand recently? Yeah. When are we talking about in the case? What kind of timeline are we talking about? 2008, and 2008, that's precisely a time where, well, the crisis that was just being unfolded. Started off financial systems, but then spread out to the real sector too. And at one point, some of the biggest manufacturing companies like GM, for example, was on the verge of collapsing. In fact, government had to bail out GM as well. So when you have crises like this, people need to cut costs. And if you've been spending a lot of money on, say, software like this, what are the items you're gonna cut first? Then maybe, right, these stuff which you can't trace directly to the productivity. Maybe you can, but it's not very easy to compare to other more visible items. So we're in a situation where we have a company that is been successful in the past, but somehow it got hit by crisis. So people cut expenditures on IT. In fact, on hardware more specifically. So if they were cutting their expenditures on hardware, does that mean they don't need computers to work? Imagine yourself back 10 years ago, can you live without a computer? You could, right? You could, but you're a business. If you own a business 10 years ago, do you think your business can live without a computer? Yeah, we're shifting more to what may be now, right? You can do away with the computer, but it's going to make your life a bit more difficult. So the question is, you do want to use computers, but the question is, whose computer would you like to buy? So we were selling to corporates, but has anyone actually used Sun Microsystems workstations at all in your life? Have you actually seen one? When we talk about business computers, you go to your office, what kind of computers does your office use? Dell. Anything else? HP? Acer, right? Lenovo. So the hardware market is actually pretty much open, and there are many other competitive tools. Now in the past, Sun was able to kind of ride out success because Sun went after the high-end market. But when you're buying company computers, it's a bit like buying company cars. Okay, when you buy company cars so that your sales force can work, you can buy them a BMW. You can also buy them a Toyota Camry. You get there. Probably don't need to use a full horsepower of BMW, because if you drive to the full horsepower, you are most likely violating the speed limit in Thailand anyway. So, no doubt about capabilities, but do you need that kind of capability for business users? Right. So, in the backdrop, we were selling really expensive stuff. Used to be really good because companies were affording that. But when companies realize there's cheaper alternatives, and when you're being asked to justify your spending, it gets difficult to justify all these expensive purchases on the machine. So we have competition, okay, from producers like HP, Dell, and even more local people like Acer, if you want to go to that market, Lenovo and so on. So that's what's happening. Okay. So we want to buy Sun, but are we the only person who wants to buy Sun? No, who else wanted to buy Sun? IBM. Okay. The case doesn't say much about why IBM wanted to buy Sun, but if you want to guess why IBM wanted to buy Sun, what would be your best guess?
Take over competition.
Yeah. You might be, part of it might be hubris, right? You have a company that usually really successful. Now that you have the cash to buy that company up when they're on a downturn, God knows, you may actually have a personal grudge against the CEO of Sun when things are doing really well. So you want to just buy it to spite them. Maybe. But what kind of company is IBM now? Right, we used to have that ThinkPad from IBM, but by this point, ThinkPad is no longer owned by IBM. It's been sold to Lenovo already, right? So IBM is also a software/consulting company. So they're buying it for the, both the workstation servers and also the software they could use. Because turns out Java is actually a very popular language for developers. And so MySQL and also Solaris. But why did IBM bid fall through? why they stopped pursuing the company in the end.
The antitrust.
Right. So part of the impeding forces that stop M&A transactions is the concerns that when you monopolize the market, you may abuse your power to extract rent from consumers to the detriment of consumer welfare. So typically, when you have big mergers like this, you have to get approvals from the whichever antitrust if it's US language, or competition commission if it's UK language, to get a clearance that yes, you can do this merger. The resulting market power is going to be higher, but not high enough such that people are going to be concerned. So the key concerns for these commissions, we don't have this in the case, but typically if you want to think about what gets approved and what doesn't get approved, okay, monopoly can be bad, okay, but if you're monopoly in the market that is easily contestable, then you have an outside force that can shape your behavior. You'll be more reluctant to abuse the market if you know other people can compete against you. So the consideration that they have for the antitrust concern combines both aspects of your market power. Once you combine the two companies together, how much market power do you have? But two, the likelihood of you abusing the market power. So if the market is contestable, okay, then you're gonna be less concerned, okay, less concerned about having a very big player dominating the market. So this is a very similar idea to company ownership, like we talked about last time. Right? When you have entrenched managers in the company, it means managers can abuse their power to the detriment of shareholders. So if the management structure in your company is open for competition, if people can contest for ownership in the company, it gives you the external disciplining force so that managers, even though they're powerful, they don't abuse their power. So the same logic applies, right? You want to create a sense of not a contestability. Okay? You can have people who have big control, but as long as they can be easily contested, the concern isn't as high as a more entrenched market where entrenched situation where people can't challenge you for control. Okay, good. So we're buying Sun as Oracle, and you can buy any company you want actually. And if the bargaining power between the two sides is such that there's not really asymmetry between bargaining power, you tend to have to buy things at the fair value. So think about Oracle buying Sun as you buying Sun. Okay, you buy the stocks of Sun. Enough of it, you can own the company too. So why should it be different when a company like Oracle buying Sun? Why should we be able to buy this company at a higher value? The answer lies in only one area alone, right? Because of synergy. Because without synergy, there's no reason why anyone should be willing to pay a price higher than the fair value right now of the company. So the key, the key rationale behind this acquisition or any acquisition better be motivated by value creation. Unless you're able to make an argument that I'm buying something at a price below its fair value right now, then there's really no gain to buying that, because you'll be indifferent between buying or not buying if you're paying something at a price equal to fair value. But here we have a situation where we can potentially have fair value, have additional value by combining two companies together. Right? So the source of synergies, what does the case say about what are potential source of synergies that we can get from acquiring Sun? So you're modeling, I guess, what kind of items, what kind of benefits have you included as the synergies of acquiring Sun from Oracle? What does acquiring Sun do for you? Or what does acquiring Sun as Oracle do to Sun? Yes, thank you.
right now Oracle only has software, but with the acquisition of Sun, they'll have hardware where they can house their software in.
Okay, it looks like a good marriage, right? Because what we're doing right now doesn't really overlap with what Sun does. So to the extent that Sun was selling some hardware already, why not sell hardware with our software as well? A bit of a cross-selling, upselling, right? That gives you the opportunity to do so. Okay. Okay, so synergy between these two aspects of the business that we're looking for. Anything else that you think could be done to help the company? Or at least what the case said could be done to help the company? Okay. You buy the customer list, right? These are usually the customers of Sun. Now we're gonna go after them too. So we can sell more Oracle stuff. So that's more like revenue side. Okay. Are there any other ways for you to improve the value for the entity once you combine the two companies together? Cutting costs. Examples? Reduce employees. And so on, right? So the case actually not very specific about this, but the case gave you some numbers. So all these combined, they say it can be worth almost 900 million per year. Are there any other items that you would want to account for when you combine the two companies? So it's not just a benefit of integrating alone, right? One of the areas where there's a lot of study on this and also a lot of people working and making a lot of money on this is integration. So post-integration plan, you have two companies, potentially different culture. So when you combine them together, there's going to be some, new systems that need to be instilled. That's one thing. And if you're laying off employees and so on, typically that's going to be what we refer to as a restructuring charge, right? I think even the restructuring word is used enough so that in Japanese, if you are told you're restructured, it means you're laid off. Restructuring typically just means laying off people. So that's going to incur one-time cost typically, but an ongoing revenue. So you can evaluate the benefit of laying off people by paying them today to leave the company. The Civil Service of Thailand did that once through their early retirement program. So they asked people, at one point in time, Thailand thought we have too many civil servants. So we asked some of the civil servants that if you want to retire now, we're going to pay you a severance, a lump sum today, so that you can stop the service. So they hope that once you pay this lump sum severance, then you save on the ongoing costs in the future. So that will be your restructuring charge. Thai Airways did that at some point, and many companies would do this when they want to downsize their workforce too. So you're going to be saving. So the 900 million here includes the saving in the future, but you're going to have to pay some lump sum money today upfront. Incidentally, the downsizing of Thai civil servants now is the opposite, right? You know how many civil servants we have in Thailand right now? People who work for the government. We have about 70 million people in Thailand, right? Would you like to guess how many people work for the government in Thailand? 30 million? That's a bit high. That's a bit high, but it's high, but not that high. It's 10 million, okay, 70 million. If you take people who can't work anymore, that's about 30 people. So there'll be about 40 million people in the workforce. That means every one person in 4 person you meet on the street actually works for the government. A bit too high. It's about 2 million. 2 million people. But do we think it's 2 million high? Do you know how many civil servants that Japan have? 100 million people in population. They have 500,000 civil servants. So in Thailand, we have about 4 times that. And also in terms of ratio, even more than that. So kind of really thinking went reverse a little bit. Okay, now we're actually increasing civil servants every year for some reason. But in the old days, we're trying to get rid of civil servants by having them take early retirement program. But that's the, from the cost that you're going to get from cutting employees, there's going to be restructuring charges. And the case says it's going to be spread out into 2 components, but in total it's 1.1 billion. Right? And also the loss of operating income and so on. So the question that if you are working as an M&A analyst, you have to ask yourself is, we're paying these, okay, to restructure the company. How certain are we that we're going to get all these benefits in the future? You can try to do a valuation of each component bit by bit to see the source of value creation, how much we're getting out of it. But you can also combine them together and then call this bunch the synergy. And once you have this number, okay, this will form the basis of the additional value you believe you get from buying this company in excess of just getting the value of the company as is. So the case purposely gave you information on both companies, but you didn't really need to project the financial performance of both companies. Because like we talked about last time, you can do the performance of both companies, but all we're interested in is the incremental changes to the company when you are changing ownership. So if we can isolate the incremental changes, the synergy components, that's what suffices. So we will do the valuation in 2 phases. The first phase is a stand-alone valuation of the company. And then you do the similar, you do the valuation, but now adding the benefits and the costs of the restructuring or whatever synergies you get, and then see what is your final valuation. So we're offering $9.5. What kind of valuation do you guys get? 13? Anyone got less than 9.5? So I guess most of you got more than 9.5. So the question is, are we paying 9.5? Is that enough? So let's just cut to the chase, right? Because the valuation part is more a technical part now. I guess the numbers and stuff will be given in the case. So I hope you see enough of these that we don't need to spend a lot of time discussing how to get to the final valuation. I'll come back and talk a little bit about that, but let's talk about the pricing. 9.5 that we offered is the price that we're paying for the company. And hopefully we're paying for less than the value of what we think the company should be valued at. So if you were Sun Microsystems, would you accept the price of $9.5 per share? Let me switch the other way around to Sun Microsystems. Would you sell your company at 9.5? Maybe no, maybe yes. And for those of you who said yes, okay, why would you say yes to 9.5? Right, because right now all that Sun knows is that Oracle wants to buy, and right now Sun's stock price is 6 point something, right? I guess you can round it up to 7. Right now your price is 7, somebody offers to buy you at 9.5. Should you be happy about that? You should be pretty happy about that, right? So why might you want to reject still? Could be part of bargaining power. Because you know that if the other person can pay 9.5, then to them it must be worth at least 9.5. Obviously more than that. Because if it's worth more than that, there's no way that they're going to offer this in the first place. So we can do a bit of a visual analysis. Okay. Okay, 6.7 you said? I'm not sure what the price is. Let's just say right now the price 6.7. And the offer comes in at 9.5. This is all, okay? This is all that, if you are management on board director of Sun, this is all that you see. You add the dot to be more clear. If everything has, if the game here, the bargaining game here is full information, then you would know that from Oracle's valuation, maybe something like 11, I don't know. You know they can pay more. But the problem for you as a management of Sun is that this line isn't easily visible to you. You can try to think, okay, from Oracle's perspective. If I were Oracle and I come in, what could I do to the company? But then again, you're working based off different information. Because in reality, we have information asymmetry between different parties. You can try to best guess them, but you're not working off the same set of information. So, Sun's best guess may be somewhere above here, or Sun's best guess may be somewhere below here. We don't know. The outcome in the end will be a process of bargaining game between the two parties. So if there's a third party coming in, suppose IBM can come in to buy again, then we can easily see that maybe the price may not end up at just 9.5. The price may end up somewhere more. The price may even end up somewhere very, very far. So I want you to go back and think about what happened a few years ago when Thailand opened up the license for 3G airwaves. A few people went in and compete, and in the end, the person who won was, there were a few rounds, right? But the first round that they went in, the person who won was AIS. You guys remember what kind of price AIS was paying? That was the first, there's another round too, right? Subsequent round, AIS didn't even win. Somebody else won instead. The funny thing is that the person who won the airwaves ended up returning the right to the airwaves. Remember who that person was?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what happens in bidding war. Right? We have a bidding war and you really want to have that asset, you bid up the price. Sometimes you may even bid up the price well beyond what you wanted to pay. But if you really want it, you're going to have to pay for that price. So here we have an absence of bidder. Research shows that we have M&A like this, and when there's a contest, prices tend to go up. Last time we talked about a white knight strategy to counter yourself against M&A raiders, right? One of the reasons why you might want to invite a white knight is that you might just want to invite someone in to create a sense of competition. You're going to sell the company anyway, but at least sell the company with some competition so that the valuation gets driven up a little bit. Okay, so that's downside of not having any outside benchmarks to compare against. The case mentions something about acquisition premium. Okay, the price that we're being paid is, I think 40%, right? At 40% premium above the close price. So I'm not sure whether it's 40% or not, but we can compute. The difference here is a premium. Compute that as percentage. And sometimes you read investment banking reports. People will give you information about what happened in comparable deals. Right? You would do like earlier transactions as a way to benchmark of our company. One of the numbers that get reported is a premium over the close price. like 20%, 30%, 40%, and so on. Let me ask you, okay, what information does a premium convey to you? If you look at other deals, suppose we have other tech companies involved in M&A deals like this, and we saw their premium in that acquisition. What information does a premium convey to us? How useful is it for us if you want to analyze our deal using somebody else's precedent transaction, especially using their premium? If you were on the board of directors and somebody told you, right, the last transaction in the tech industry, okay, the last few transactions, they were all closing at 25% premium over close price. Our transaction is closing at 40% premium over close price. How does that make you feel? Would you call yourself a good deal? Would you call yourself an okay deal? Or how would you view your deal? Would 40% be sufficient for you as board of directors or Sun Microsystem? So let's think about what the premium represents. Okay, what mathematically does a premium represent? So a price that you're being acquired at, okay, minus a price before the acquisition happened, then you scale it by the price before. So the 40% premium would be something like 9.5 minus 6.7 divided by 6.7. In other words, 9.5 divided by 6.7 minus 1. So you see some numbers, and what does that number convey to you? If you have higher premium, does that mean it's a good deal for you? Could you compare your premium number to other transactions? What do you think? Yes, sorry? Compare with maybe, suppose we had 3 other M&A deals in the same space, in the same industry before, and they all have some certain premium value. How would we use those premium, the acquisition premium from previous deals for our deal? I guess this case is a little difficult to convey because I don't think they gave you the information, right? I don't think at the back of the case you have any information about earlier deals at all. So this is a atypical M&A case in the sense that typically when you build out a report, like an investment banking report, you would pull out comps like this. We have some comps in the same industry. You also pull most recent M&A transactions and include that as part of your exhibits. I've always questioned the wisdom of including those previous transactions in the exhibits too. If you think about it from a rational point of view, how useful is that information for us in analyzing our deal? If we see the premium of the previous 3 deals in the industry. That's how you might want to use it, right? But let's think about that information conveyed in the premium. Can we conclude that if, okay, as seller, okay, we are now Sun Microsystem, and we see that Oracle is offering 40% premium over close price, and on average, other deals have only been able to get 25% premium. Would that make Sun Microsystems happy to accept the deal? That's how we might want to feel, right? But let's think about what information does the premium convey.
That the value is really high.
That the price that's being paid for the company is high compared to the close price, right? Implicitly, it contains a few information that we don't get to observe and we're taking for granted here. Number one, okay, we're assuming that the price of the company before is reflective of the company value as it should be. So if price reflected value, the company wasn't being undervalued, that's fine, no problem. But the second component is the price you're paying for the company contains part of synergies. But the question is, does it contain all the synergy that you're going to get in the deal? If you look at past transactions, based on the diagram that we have over here, okay, what is the value of the company with synergy based on this diagram over here? It's 11, right? 11 is the value of the company with synergy. But what do outsiders observe? Do outsiders observe that number? We only observe the price that you are acquiring the company at. So this is one of the most important flaws of using the premium, acquisition premium, as anything meaningful at all. I want to point this out because you see this a lot in investment banking decks. You look at past transactions, you see the premium over the close price of those transactions. And you have a tendency to use that number in a way to compare against your current transaction. But based on our discussion earlier, that number is not comparable. Because number one, we don't know the close price, whether it reflects the market value or not. And number two, we don't even know whether the final acquisition price reflects all the synergy or just part of synergy. So there's no way for us to meaningfully compare this number of past transactions to our value at all. This makes it very difficult, okay, for M&A transactions to actually benchmark your transaction versus other companies in the same space. But it gets used a lot anyway because it's something that you could compute. The sad part is that even you can compute, you can see, but you try to make meaning out of something that you see, even though it's not very meaningful at all. So in the end, people pay a lot of attention to the premium, okay, acquisition premium, and use that to judge whether this acquisition is too expensive or too cheap. But in reality, you can't actually make that assessment because whether we want to say this is too expensive or too cheap, you have to make it against this 11 number, which is unobserved to the outside market. So this poses both practitioners, a challenge to both practitioners to try to use that number meaningfully, and also to researcher. Last time I talked about there's been a lot of research on M&A and whether it's good or bad for companies, right? And in the past, research used to make inferences about whether this company is good or bad based on the acquisition premium. You get lots of acquisition premium, it means about the deal is creating a lot of value. True, but not really true, because you are not capturing the full extent of the value being created. But let me tell you the reason why it still gets used a lot in real life. Okay? Because if you are sitting on the board of directors, you have a fiduciary duty to take decisions that have the best interest for the company. On the flip side, if you make decisions that end up hurting the company, in Thailand, in most places, you can actually be sued and even go to jail, okay, for making those decisions. So before you accept or reject any deal, you have to have some tangible evidence that you can defend yourself against that I am making those decisions in the best interest of shareholders. So in the end, okay, those acquisition premium ends up being used as a defense to justify transaction that, hey, look, I am selling this. Okay, I am selling this to this bidder. It's the highest bidder, and also look at this. Other transaction only had premium of 25%. This one we're able to get premium of 40%. So we're doing much better than other transactions. In reality, it's not really because of your skill. You're able to sell the company for a high price because the buyer sees a lot of potential in your company. But it ends up being used as a defense mechanism for board directors. So that's why the acquisition premium actually still gets featured a lot in investment banking decks, because they act as a way to help the board directors justify their decision. Okay, but in reality, when you do the evaluation, okay, we see how we make that evaluation, and then I hope you guys all come to the same conclusion that 9.5, okay, even though it looks like it's a high price to pay compared to current price of the company, there's still a lot of money on the table that we can still benefit from. Oracle may not, Sun may not know this, Sun may not see this, but it's okay because from their perspective, they are getting a lot more than what it is today. So we have a room for a win-win negotiation here. In terms of negotiation class, there's a concept called the best alternative to negotiate outcome. Okay, best over the last A is best alternative to negotiated something. It stands with A, but I'm not sure what it is. So you can try to search for BATNA. And this BATNA, another name we see in economics is the reservation price. Another name for that is a walk-away price. And conceptually, what this looks like is that if you're coming to the negotiation table, each party should have a number in their mind. Agreement. Okay, thank you. Okay. Best alternative to negotiate agreement, BATNA. So when you come to a negotiation table, each party establish what their reservation price is, their walkaway price is. So from a perspective, okay, of the person coming to the table as a seller, you know the current price is at 6.7. So we know we can't accept anything less than 6.7. Otherwise, it's silly because you could have sold to somebody else at a price 6.7 for sure. So from the seller's perspective, okay, the minimum price is 6.7. Anything above that, they would love to get. Anything less than that, they would walk away. And we have Oracle's valuation of this company. This forms a maximum willingness to pay. That means if we can have a negotiated agreement and it's something that is higher than 11, it's not a good deal for us anymore. We might as well walk away and then reserve our money to do something else instead because the price we pay is just way too high. So anything above that range, Oracle walks away. Okay, so this gives us this wide range over here where both your acceptable region and the seller's acceptable region overlap. If those two zones overlap, the name in the negotiating literature is zone of possible agreement, which is abbreviated as SOFA. So if you're negotiating based on a single outcome, say price, right, the idea becomes very clear. Anything that is within this range, both of us win because we have established our walkaway price. For me as seller, anything less than 6.7, I am very unhappy. For me as buyer, anything more than 11, I am very unhappy. But if those are our restrictions or boundaries, at least the intersection of what we would like contains a non-empty region. You end up anywhere on this green line here, we can strike a win-win deal. It's good for us. But the question is, how do we split the gains? Right? So this is a possible gain from this merger, but how do we negotiate the outcome? And that depends on a negotiation tactic that typically is outside the scope of the finance advisors. So when you have M&A deals like this, sometimes they would hire a professional deal negotiator to go in and actually try to bargain for the outcome. One of the things that, if you focus on one thing, which is price, can be very difficult is that both of you focus on the same thing. So you only value the price of the acquisition. it becomes difficult to find win-win situations because there are situations where the prices that both of you get don't contain any overlapping region. So negotiation deal breaks down. Okay, so if you want to focus on just doing single outcome, this tells you is there a deal to be had or not. If these two regions don't overlap with each other, then you don't even need to come to the table in the first place. But that's a limited thinking because when you negotiate for any outcome, it doesn't mean there's only one aspect you can ask for, right? Suppose you go into a store, people say when you go to supermarket stores, you really can't negotiate anything. That is not true, right? Because when you say you can't negotiate for anything, or everything is open for negotiation, if they can't reduce the price for you, maybe there's something else they can do. Maybe they can deliver for you. Okay? Maybe they can allow you to mix the stuff for the same price. That's also variations that could be valuable to you. So anytime you're stuck in a situation where you have to negotiate on something, one of the good strategies is to, number one, okay, figure out first, is there any overlap between what you and I want? Is there a way for us to walk away from this negotiation and both of us happy? If there's that zone, if there's that sofa, fantastic. Okay, both of us can walk away happy. If those zones doesn't overlap, are there anything else that might be useful or valuable to both of us, but not on the table right now? If so, then bring them on the table. Okay, because when we talk about valuation, what's valuable to us might not just be limited to how much money we get paid, but it could be any other thing that make our utility higher, make us happier. Can I get more recognition? Can I get promoted? Can I get Can I get shifted to a different division instead? Right. When you do this M&A, I have some very implicit agreements with someone that I'm going to be, supporting this. If I am being taken over, can I count on you to keep the promise I made to my team? If so, maybe I don't mind being replaced as long as you can protect that for me. So those are all possible negotiations. If you watch, movie like the West Wing, House of Cards, you know what this means, right? There's not just a single area where you can negotiate about. You can open up other rooms for negotiation too. So I want you to keep this at the back of your mind because one of the exercises we're going to be doing involves both, okay, how to value things, and also involve negotiation. The simulation game we'll be playing together will involve both aspects. So I'm going to give you some information early to prepare at least the technical aspects. But then in the simulation game, part of your job is also to try to find out information that you have about the deal as well. And that may change the way you value the company, change your willingness to offer the price, and also change your willingness to accept the price being offered to you. Okay? So being able to do valuation is good, it's fantastic, but when we have deals like M&A, it turns out it's only part of the whole picture. Yes?
What if the target firm is a private firm? So what kind of number should we use to compare, right, like the price?
Okay, so you won't have this number, but you will have to have some estimate of what this is worth to you. So if this won't be a price in the market, but you would have to guess that the private firm selling to you have a number in their mind of this is what they think they're worth. Okay, does that answer your question? I mean, here, if you're in the market, it's simple, it's visible, you can see that's the price in the market. But if it's off market, then you have to evolve a little more judgment. The logic's the same. Think of that as a price which, if you offer to the seller says, that's offensive, I'm not going to take it, I'm going to walk away from the table. So that's what number conceptually means. So this may be not 6.7, right? Because if you think about our early discussion of the premium, if we apply the premium of recent transactions and say, the board has to save their face and do the fiduciary duty. So even though the price right now is 6.7, from board perspective, no, my walkaway price is not 6.7, it's somewhere a bit higher because I know recent transaction was able to get 25% premium. So for me, you must offer at least 25% premium, otherwise I'm not going to take it. So you can start accounting for these and then see how your field for negotiation gets adjusted over time. So to summarize, this is one dimension. Okay? You can imagine the same kind of concept in other dimensions of negotiation too. Whenever I take over your company, I'm going to be laying off people. So as seller to the acquirer, I can make demands that I can sell to you if you make promises not to lay off more than 5% of my workforce. If you lay off more than that, then I'm sorry, even if you have offered me a high price, I don't think I can sell to you. Right? So these are areas which are not reflected in the price, but also is valuable to the person who's coming to negotiation table. And the key to a good and successful negotiation is that find something, okay, that the other person values a lot, but you can give, and it doesn't cost you very much. Also, you can flip the table. Okay, you don't want to be giving away things that you value a lot from the other person perspective. They don't care about this at all. So it's also about figuring out, okay, where do we stand in terms of what are your preferences, what are your priorities, and what are your values. And then the key to achieving a win-win negotiation is then trying to navigate all those compromises such that in the end you walk away from the table, both persons are happy. Okay. So let's review a little bit, right, in terms of valuation mechanics. In terms of steps that you would have done was to value the company. Value the company on a standalone basis. Okay, which you could have done using free cash flow estimates given earlier, and with WACC you estimate to get the value. Or you could use the EBITDA multiple to get that as well. Okay, the case explicitly gives you pro forma numbers that has both EV and EBITDA, because one of the most popular multiples that people use in corporate finance is the EV/EBITDA multiple. You then get those values and then add on the synergy, which in this case is pretty big, and you get the value what this company is worth to you. Of course, you deduct the debt to get the equity value and then get the share price. So let me ask you this, what do you guys do with the cash on the company's balance sheet? Sun Microsystems actually has a lot of cash on balance sheet right now. So what do you guys do with it? You what, sorry? You include it, evaluation. So one of the tricky issues is that if you see a company that has a lot of cash right now, what do you do to that cash? Right. You would, right? You might want to do that. But one of the things you want to be worried about is that when you acquire a company, do you get access to that cash or not? Okay, so when you negotiate an M&A outcome, you have to be pretty clear to the target about what is going to happen to the cash on the balance sheet. When I buy the company, is that cash still going to be there? Or are you going to pay out that cash before I acquire the company? And if so, how are you going to pay out that cash? Okay, because if you account for this differently, the valuation to you will be a little different. But in terms of the numbers over here, right? If we want to assume that the cash on balance sheet belongs to existing shareholders, and when you buy, you don't get access to that. One way to view that is, well, think about that cash as a cash per share basis. If I am buying the company and I don't get access to it, I am not going to pay for it. So if your stock right now is worth 6.7, I'm not going to value it at 6.7. I'm going to value it at 6.7 minus the cash per share that you're going to pay out. You just adjust, okay, the benchmark numbers a little bit. But be careful, okay? In real life, when you engage in transactions like this, cash on hand is one of the most contentious issue. That when you buy the business, who gets access to that cash? When you buy the business, how much debt am I assuming? Then that affects the price you pay. But in terms of the evaluation, you're still going to evaluate the company in the same way. Just that you have to shift the numbers a little bit depending on how you treat the cash. So how much cash the company have? What items do you guys use? How much, sorry? About 3,000, right? Very good. Okay, because the two items of cash here, we have cash itself and also marketable securities. Another way to name that is cash equivalent. So we talk about excess cash on the balance sheet, you may not see the word excess cash. Actually, you will not see the word excess cash on the company balance sheet at all. It's up to you to make a judgment in estimating how much of that is actually excess. So there can be straight cash, there can be cash equivalents in terms of deposits, there can be marketable securities. But anything that could be converted into cash right now, we're going to treat them as if they're cash. And then whether you want to include the whole thing here or deduct some of that as operating cash, it's okay, you can do that. But the thing to recognize is that Sun Microsystems has $3 billion of cash on balance sheet, which is still a little too much for operation. So part of that is going to be excess cash. Okay, good. So the case actually has a couple of missing information. So I didn't give you that information. So I'll be looking forward to see what kind of assumptions you make on those. Those are the tax rates. Okay. You could back that out from the pro forma, and also the market risk premium. So typically the market risk premium is between 6% and 7%. So either numbers is fine with me, but that's what it's been like in historical data. Okay, so I left that up to you to make judgments on your own. Otherwise, okay, the steps are all fine. Some of you may adjust the WACC that the company use. Some of you may just use the exhibit given. That's also fine. The credit rating of the company in the comps table, you were given the Moody's rating, and then in the yield curve table, you were given the S&P rating. So I hope you looked up the comparison table between the two types of ratings, and you see that Ba1 is the same as BBB+. So that will be the company's cost of debt. Okay. Otherwise, I think the case, despite the length, is pretty straightforward and shows you how to do M&A valuation. Yes. BB plus, yeah. Not triple, sorry, BB plus, not triple B, sorry. BB plus. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. So 11.42. Okay. So I think that's about as much as I'd like to say about this case. At least I think the calculations and so on are, I think, more straightforward than most of the cases we've seen so far. It's just the information at the beginning is a little long. So this gives you a classic example of companies that do M&A because you have a strategic fit, your product portfolios don't overlap. So in Thailand, there was one case where an investment bank group merged with a commercial bank group, like Kiat Nakin merged with Patara. And what the reason they proposed for that merger was similar to this, because we have two companies doing very similar things but no overlap. But once you combine together, you can actually complement the business model of one another. So last point before we move on to private equity, let me talk to you a little bit about this, right? Suppose IBM is allowed to enter into the competition. and then they come in and bid. Okay, they come in and bid for Sun as well, and they keep bidding up the price, and the price somehow exceeds your willingness to pay. Say that was $11 per share. Would you stop competing with them? Are you willing to go beyond your reservation price and stay in the competition?
Yes.
Yes, because
Because at that point in time, IBM had hardware and software, and so they were rivals with Sun in the hardware section, and they were rivals with Oracle in software. And if IBM does win, Oracle probably would have been.
this is pretty bad news for you, right? Because we've been doing valuation almost as an independent consideration with respect to what other people in the space would be doing. In reality, what your company could do also depends on what your competitors would do. Imagine, okay, if Sun falls to the hand of IBM, you're losing business to IBM, you might lose business overall. If for some reason IBM says, you've been using Java Solaris, right? And also MySQL. I see you've been using my products. Well, tough luck, I'm not going to sell that to you anymore. What's going to happen to Oracle? Right? Oracle is a software company that also relies on Sun software. One of the things we didn't mention explicitly, but the case does mention, is that those two companies are kind of connected already. The Oracle right now is Sun's customer. So that's a case of a bit of vertical integration. You want to make sure that everything critical to your supply chain stays within your supply chain, that you don't remain at the mercy of someone who decides to just shut off your production. So the strategic considerations sometimes come into play. And as you can imagine, it's very hard to incorporate that in your financial models. Okay, every number, statistics, and so on that's been given to us doesn't mention anything about this. Like, what if we don't get our hands on this? Is Oracle still going to be as it is today? Maybe we get damaged. Okay, our business going forward wouldn't look the same. But that's one of the important considerations when you do M&A that might be difficult to incorporate into financial models, but would lead you to make decisions that may look irrational, but it's still important for a company to do so. Yes.
But if Oracle buy more than 11, right, then what is gonna happen to the investor on the side of the week?
Investors never know the 11 number, right? 11 number is internal to the Oracle team. Nobody else sees this. Investor only sees 9.4. So you end up paying 12. You can still come out and say a story that, well, we bought it for 12, but it's really worth 14. You can say it's worth 14. You can say it's worth anything that you want, right? That comes later. You can rewrite the history later. But from your perspective, even though this is the maximum you're willing to pay, sometimes you might want to go a bit above and beyond, especially when something is important and has strategic consideration to you. Another example of this might be real estate. Right? We're going to buy this piece of land, but if I'm competing by this piece of land, it's not like if I don't get to buy this, there's an alternative plot of land I could buy. Suppose this piece of land means something very important to me. I must have this no matter what. Then forget about valuation. Okay, you do any valuation, you still have to pay whatever it takes you if you really want to get it. So this kind of points out to the kind of difficulty, okay, when you want to value entities as opposed to valuing shares of entities. When you're buying stocks, you're buying pieces of stocks. You can buy it from person one, you can buy from person two. They're equally substitutable. When you're valuing company as a whole, you buy Sun Microsystem, it's not the same as buying Google. It's not the same as buying Yahoo. They're different companies altogether. So sometimes you get this valuation, but that will not be the final price to settle on, because there could be other reasons why you really need to have that piece in your portfolio. And so I think that's the most important thing and the most difficult challenge that I want to point out when we talk about valuations of entities versus valuation of entities for complete acquisition. versus valuing entities for fractional acquisition. Okay? So that's it for this case. Okay? So I hope the math is clear and straightforward to you. Next, we're going to go to the topic of private equity instead. So let's switch to the lecture stuff. Okay. Okay, so private equity, what does it mean? Well, before we talk about what private equity means, let's just talk about the definition of this word. What does it even entail? Private equity is opposite to public equity. And the strict definition between public and private is just how many people own that business. So public equity just means this company or this entity has many shareholders, and they may be listed. Okay, so a lot of public companies are listed in the market for the stock exchange, so anyone can come in and buy. There are also public companies that have a lot of shareholders but don't list in the market. But for the working definition of this session, public equity, you can replace that and call them listed companies. So with this definition, private equity investment just means you invest in equity of things that are not listed in the stock market. Simply as that. Anything else not in the stock market, we can broadly call them private equity. So based on this definition, there are many ways for, actually no, that's later. Private equity is a big class of investment. So the blue part here represents the amount of capital being allocated to private equity investments, and from 2005 to 2016, the number has grown by almost 3 times the investment amount. And let's dig in a little deeper. Actually, no, these are not typed yet. We want to separate out what private equity investment allocate their money into. Broadly speaking, there are 3 types that are big ones, which are buyout, venture capital, and growth. One way to think about that is to think about the company life cycle. So private equity that invests at different curves, different stages of the curve, get called differently. Venture capital come in very early, even a company is still starting off and still uncertain about its success, whether it's going to be very successful in the end or just a flop. Growth, it's like a bridge. When you're still growing very fast, I want to help you expand even further. And then buyout, typically happens when the company is mature already, and the company most of the time is listed in the stock market. And then you come in and buy out the whole company and take them private. For other 2 stages, the company that you invest in may still be private companies. You're just adding more investment to the private companies. But for buyout companies, they tend to be companies that are big, most of them listed already, but then you take them private. Not always, right? There can be very big companies in those stages too, where you buy them out. But it's just reflective, at the stage of the investments, of the life cycle of where they are. So those are the 3 types. There's a little bit of others. Other just means everything else. Sometimes private equity can be investing in, say, real estate, or even investing in not even equity. That happens sometimes. So here's a term that doesn't get used elsewhere except private equity, the term called dry powder. Can you guess what dry powder means? Can you guess where dry powder comes from? If you talk about dry powder, what comes to your mind? What kind of powder? Maybe I don't want to know actually. So in the old days, when you're firing guns, the first types of guns ever invented in the world are actually called muskets. Okay? And when you fire muskets, what you do is you have a very long metallic tube. You put in metallic ball inside, and you put in a lot of gunpowder. Then you light it up. Then the explosion fires off the metal pellet as bullet. That is where the word gunpowder comes from. Because dry powder comes from. Because if your gunpowder is dry, it just means you have ammunition. You can fire, you can go and fight other people. So think of dry powder as your ammunition, and your ammunition in finance is going to be the spare bullets you can fire, which is capital. So think of that as the uninvested capital. We're going to see later why we classify them as dry powder. Because when you raise funds, it doesn't mean you use the funds straight away. When you are working in a private equity business, you are managing funds on behalf of some groups of investors. So you're going to go and ask people that you know, hey, I'm going to manage your money for you, so how much would you be willing to commit to me? So you commit some amount of money to me, but you don't need to give me all that money straight away. I'll start calling for the capital that when I see investments that I need, but the amount that you pledge to me, but I haven't called yet, we call that a dry powder. So think about that as a remaining capital that remains to be allocated to investments in the world. And you can imagine why dry powder matters, because dry powder simply means the ammunition you have in your magazine that you must fire. Because you bought the bullets already, you have to use it. We're going to see later, right, why we have to use the ammunition. Next column, unrealized values. Because unlike public equity, when you buy, you can liquidate very easily. Private equity, the way for you to earn returns, means you have to exit the investment somehow. And the exit can be more, actually not can be, the exits tend to be a lot more difficult in private businesses than public businesses. So these are capital remains invested in businesses, we call them the unrealized value. Added together, just the amount of capital that's being allocated to private equity at any given point in time. Okay, so we come back to maybe, these are some concerns. Okay, if you're venture capital, private capital fund managers, you're private equity, you work in private equity, you have a private equity fund. You're managing this fund. So here's some of the concerns that people say in recently 2017 about what are the concerns that people are facing. Valuation is number one concern. Because if you think about investing, it's as buying low, selling high. The more you pay for something, okay, the less chance of you making money on the subsequent exit in the future. So when you have valuation going against you, people are trying to raise the price so that you have to pay a higher price. That's a very big concern. And you're going to see later how capital market condition affects this. Number three is fundraising. Because you're managing a fund, you are interested in not just managing one fund, because you earn a living from managing these funds. So you want to be raising more and more funds in the future so that you get to, actually keep your job and also keep your investors happy. So when private equity investors go out and raise funds, they will call this simply a raise. When you want to go for a raise, it means you're going for fundraising. So you have to basically go out like a salesperson, sell your idea to potential investors, and then they'll give funds to you to manage. Fourth, performance. Fifth, exit environment. Because when you come in, you have to find ways to exit, And whether you can exit or not sometimes depend on market conditions as well. Okay, so we saw three types of private equity already. But if you go through the cycle, you can actually be even more. You can go to break down even more than that. When the company is not doing very well, in a decline, you can go in and buy that company and then turn it around. So that's one type, okay, of private equity investments. Mezzanine financing is another way to call this is basically pre-IPO financing. The company is growing very well, but it just needs a little push before the company can IPO. So mezzanine is like, the word means when you have a floor, ground floor, and then first floor, sometimes you have a middle floor in the townhouse. That's a mezzanine floor, so basically in between. But those stages tend basically track the levels of the firm. And then the types of investments that they make and the strategies they take tend to be a little different too. But in this one you can go and read mostly for yourself. But as we move from the early stage to late stage, the kind of companies you want to invest in tend to vary as well. Okay, when we invest in companies that are in early stage, people don't really go for normal businesses, not stable, predictable businesses. They want to go for something disruptive, something that can potentially change the way people see and do things, because that's where the money is there to be made. So they look for something that maybe high tech, or something that more closely fit the definition of startup companies as we know it today, because they're looking for astronomical returns, but they make small investments. But when you go for later stage, you don't look at small investments anymore, you look at big investments. But you prefer investments in businesses where you have more predictable returns, something that has more transparent business model and good underlying economics. Would you like to guess why, okay, the early stage versus late stage, we focus on different types of companies? The answer lies in the strategies that the company use in order to generate returns. And suppose I want to generate a return of say 20%. What are the two ways of generating 20% returns? Not two ways, I guess there's several ways to generate 20% return. Suppose I want to get 20%. What are ways for me to have investments and generate 20%? Okay, high growth stocks maybe, but high growth, let me write it down. But high growth stocks that give you 20%, the reason why you're able to get 20% may be because it's pretty uncertain, right? Risky. So you take risky investments. So if it's risky, it probably means some of your investments are going to fail. What about another way to get 20% returns on something? Can I take something that gives me 8% return and make it 20% returns? If I invest my money in a business that generates only 8% return, what is the way for me to make sure my money actually generates more than 8% returns? The keyword lies in the business, right? So we either have very risky business. So you have very risky return, very high return. Or I can have a safe business and still get very high return on my equity if I use a lot of leverage. So if you look back at the history of any given firms, in the early stage, most firms tend to be pretty risky. What we know in finance theory about firms that are risky is that lenders tend to avoid them. When you're young companies that are risky starting up, you tend to have a harder time accessing the market for capital. But investors who are shareholders, equity investors, they are more likely, they're more open to taking the risk, but then they're going to demand a lot of returns too. So in the early stages, most of the companies tend to get funded using equity. But as the companies become mature, cash flows become more stable, risk becomes less of a concern, more predictable over time, and then lenders are happier lending to those companies because they're more certain. Not that more certain, they're more what's the appropriate word to say? They're less concerned that you are not gonna default on your payment. So your debt capacity goes up as your firm matures. So as a firm reaches this stage, okay, if you're investing in that company, you can take on debt against that company. So this gives you a couple of ways to have very high returns in investing in 20%. Then I come back to the 20% later, why this 20% is a very important number when you invest in private equity. Okay. So you can have a high growth and risky, but this can fail. But you can have companies that are safe, and use leverage. Okay. It may fail, but you don't want it to fail. So you can make investments in companies that have really, really high returns, like 200%, 500% returns, like the startup companies, Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, Google, and so on. But there's a risk that those companies are going to go bust. But then you're okay because you're spreading your investment across many, in small amounts, across many businesses, so that when the businesses don't succeed, you're still okay, as long as you have some superstars that make up the rest of your portfolio. So you invest in this stage, the VC stage, okay? You invest in many small investments. But one investment, maybe one unicorn, right? They like to use the word unicorn for a company that has $1 billion valuation. You know, one unicorn, one superstar makes up the majority of returns. So if you want to use a baseball analogy, okay, this is basically a home run strategy. I go out and only hit home runs. I don't care about loading all the bases. I don't want to play safe. I just want to make sure when I go out, I score. Each investment I make better have a chance of being a home run. So, you know, go big or go home. So sometimes I use the word moonshot, right? Because you can basically aim for the moon. So that once you reach the moon, you're the person who carries the rest of the portfolio. When the rest fail, you're still okay. Okay, so one unicorn makes up majority of the return in this portfolio. So many small investments, but hopefully some succeed. But when they succeed, they really succeed big time. You know, you put in 1 million, it becomes 100 million. Other companies, you put in one, it disappears. It's fine because you can afford to take that risk. If you go safe, on the other hand, okay, companies tend to be bigger. So for those companies, you really want to make sure they don't fail. So you can't afford to fail for a strategy like this. So that means when you're in this space, when you do a buyout, you don't invest in many companies. Okay, you pour all your capital in the companies which you think succeed very well, and then you better make sure that that company really does succeed as the way you plan. You put on a lot of debt to that company so that you can magnify your returns. But then you also help the company navigate so that it doesn't fail. So a different kind of strategy. Okay, I don't want any of my portfolio company to fail if I operate in this space, because one failure it's a big chunk of my investment. I can't take that. Whereas over here, I can afford to take some failure because individual failures are very small. As long as we have very little success, we are fine. So even though those are all classified as private equity, depending on where you are, your business model are actually very different. Okay, so let's take a break. We'll come back and talk